Have any of your family members been drafted before?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a story about how my grandpa got out of being drafted. So when my grandparents got married, my grandma was 17 years old and my grandpa was 18. So they had a very young marriage. And neither of my grandparents had even a high school diploma, which it's really hard to get a job even in that day and age without a high school diploma. But my grandpa did it. He had a job throughout a few years working at a construction site business, and he worked his butt off at that. And although he was a really hard worker, he just never saw being in the military in his cards. But that was about to change. So one day he got home from work, and it was a really long day, and he walked up to the mailbox, and he opened up the mailbox, and he took out the letter, and he knew without even having to open it what the letter was. And he had just found out that the United States military was going to begin drafting for the Vietnam War, and he looked down and he saw that it was from the United States military. So he put the letter back in the mailbox, he closed the door, and he lifted up the flap, and he walked away from the mailbox, and he enlisted in the United States Coast Guard instead. He didn't want anything to do with fighting on the front line, and he just didn't want to put his marriage at risk or do anything like that, so he decided to be in the Coast Guard instead. It was a much safer option for him. And so my grandma and him packed up their bags and they went to Alaska, and my grandpa just learned so much while he was serving his time in Alaska. He met lifelong friends that he kept for his whole life, and he had amazing stories of his time in the Coast Guard, and he learned some really valuable leadership skills as well. And while we were over in Alaska, my grandma and him had my mom, and after serving his time over there, they came back to Washington State, and they had my aunt and my uncle back in Puyallup, Washington. And so my grandpa was back in Puyallup, and he had been working at the construction site for a while afterwards, and he just knew that something wasn't right. He just wasn't liking where he was fitting in the construction business. He knew he had so much more potential. And he had learned all of these leadership skills from being in the Coast Guard, so he decided to put them to use. So he opened up his own septic tank system business. And needless to say, that was a very, very messy business to get into, and he didn't really like it, but he knew he had to get his foot in the door before creating his own construction business. And so he got his foot in the door, and he started building his business from the ground up and just gaining lots of relationships from all over the Puyallup area and Tacoma even, and just worked his butt off. He was a really hard worker for sure. And then he ended up growing that business into a construction business, which was extremely successful and just grew over the course of his lifetime. This business gave my mom her very first position as a receptionist at the construction site. My grandpa just continued to build relationships all throughout the Puyallup and Western Washington area, and he was well respected throughout the Puyallup area as well. And he was not only successful financially, but he was also successful with relationships and personally as well. And I know that all of us grandkids looked up to him immensely. And so this is just one of the ways that my grandpa worked his way out of a sticky situation and made the best of it and put his leadership skills to the test. And without even a high school diploma, my grandpa was one of the most successful men that I will ever know.